All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our seventh BCBA practice exam, where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass the exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A new work program is offering jobs to a group of adults who live in an assisted residential facility. Two behavior analysts are contracted to write treatment plans for these adults. The behavior analysts start by finding out what jobs are offered and then going to those workplaces and conducting an ecological assessment. What are the analysts doing? So we're looking at the analyst behavior, and they are working with an assisted residential facility. Specifically, they're trying to write treatment plans for these adults who are looking for jobs. So, what do these analysts do? They find out what jobs are offered, then they go to those places and conduct ecological assessments. Now, first things first, what's an ecological assessment? It's an environmental assessment. And you might say, well, isn't every assessment environmental? Technically, yes. But an ecological assessment is a specific assessment we use to analyze the environment when we're not concerned so much with the learner or the participant, more along the lines of what's in the environment, who's in the environment, what stimuli is in the environment. And that's what these analysts are doing. And why would they be doing that? Well, clearly, the analysts are looking to begin work on generalization. Because remember, generalization is a priority. It might be the most important priority, and you program for generalization. We don't hope and wish and pray for generalization. We program and plan for generalization. So, how are the analysts preparing for generalization? A, general case analysis. A general case analysis is exactly what they're doing here. They're going to the environment and looking at all the potential stimuli in the environment that could evoke responses, that could be reinforcing. They're essentially looking at the big picture of the generalization plan. And so through this ecological assessment, they're conducting a general case analysis. Now, what about training loosely? Well, these next three are almost a product of that general case analysis. With training loosely, you're going to vary non critical aspects of the environment. So, whenever they're doing job training, they're going to vary different aspects during training that may be non critical to actually performing the job. Using indiscriminable contingencies. When they're training, they're going to be sure and disguise reinforcement and disguise consequences. And then programming common stimuli. After they conduct a general case analysis, they're going to go through and start to work in aspects of the job site into the training site. So you can see that everything about planning and programming for generalization kind of begins with this general case analysis. And that's what these analysts are doing. You, a behavior analyst, are asked to consult with your client school regarding outbursts from your client in the classroom. You typically work in home with this client. After an evaluation, you recommend that the teaching staff put this behavior on extinction. In order for extinction to be most effective, what should you make sure and do? When you are training on extinction, and we're looking at your behavior relative to training on extinction, and we want extinction to be effective. The first rule of extinction is it's got to be almost as close to 100% as possible. Extinction can't be half-hearted. We can't do extinction in one environment and not in another. You're asking for trouble. So the first rule of extinction is if you're going to use extinction, everybody's got to be using extinction. And so when you're training for extinction, there are things you need to consider because extinction, while very effective, can be very difficult as well. That's why you might hear today a lot of pushback on extinction. Not because it isn't effective, it just is often done incorrectly, leading to more problems than what was maybe even previously existed before. So as you, as this analyst, are at your client's school, right? So you work and home as well. So you've got two environments, and you're telling the teaching staff to put the behavior on extinction. So what do you need to do now to make this most effective? A, prepare the teaching staff at school for possible extinction burst. Absolutely. We can plan for extinction burst. They're expected. And so if you're going to teach somebody extinction and ask them to do extinction, you need to train them and prepare them for extinction burst. A looks good. Read all of your answer choices. B, train the client's parents on the ethical use of punishment. Does punishment have anything to do with our answer? No, it isn't in the question. We're not talking punishment. Extinction and punishment aren't the same. B is not relevant. C, design an in-home extinction procedure for the client stakeholders. Why would this be important? Well, if we go to the school and put the behavior on extinction, and then the client goes home and it's not an extinction, what can we expect? We can expect that behavior to likely spike at home. So if we're going to be putting this behavior on extinction in school, we need to go home as well and put that behavior on extinction. And so to best prepare for extinction and to make it most effective, we need to prepare for possible extinction burst, and we need to make sure extinction is occurring in all these different environments. Paul usually does his grocery shopping on Sundays. He decides he would try a different store than his usual store this weekend because it was closer to his house. Paul showed up at the store, started to pick out his usual items, but all the items were nearly double the price. Paul never went back to the store. Why? All right, we have a consequence question. Our three primary consequences: reinforcement, punishment, extinction. But first, we ask ourselves, did the behavior increase or decrease in the future? If it increased, we're looking at reinforcement. If it decreased, it's punishment or extinction. Well, Paul went to this new store and then never went back. So did Paul's behavior increase or decrease? Clearly, it decreased. So Paul was either punished or his behavior is put on extinction. Now we can see from our answer choices, which we don't jump to the answer choices, but given the fact we're eliminating possibilities, we don't have extinction. So this must be a punishment procedure. A and B are out. It's not reinforcement. How do we know that so quickly? Again, future behavior. If it increased, it's reinforcement. If it decreased, it's punishment or extinction. Don't make it more complicated than that. So now we have to ask ourselves, was the consequence added or removed? Well, Paul went to the store. He showed up. He started to pick out items. All the items were nearly double the price. So as he's picking out his items, what's occurring? Well, all these prices, these very expensive prices, are being added to the equation. That's the consequence of picking out items at this store. They're all nearly double the price. So Paul's behavior is being punished by these very, very expensive prices. These prices are being added, in this case, as a consequence. And so Paul never went back to the store. Why? Well, we eliminated reinforcement because his behavior decreased. The prices were added, these very expensive prices. So it's positive. So we have positive punishment. Negative is when we take something away as a consequence. And so consequence questions are pretty much that straightforward. Behavior increase or decrease, was something added, taken away, or withheld. As Mr. Morgan delivers his quarterly recap to his board of directors, his administrative assistant diligently types away on her MacBook, making sure not to miss a single word Mr. Morgan said. What is the administrative assistant engaged in? So we're looking at the administrative assistant's behavior. Notice how we always start with whose behavior, right? Because on the exam, this is a shorter question, but when you get long questions with a lot of different people involved, you got to look at whose behavior you're looking at. We're looking at the administrative assistants, and what is she doing? As Mr. Morgan talks, the administrative assistant types away. So the verbal behavior of Mr. Morgan is evoking this behavior of the administrative assistant. So is the administrative assistant A, tacting? Well, no, because a tact is evoked by a nonverbal stimulus. The administrative assistant's behavior is evoked by Mr. Morgan's verbal behavior. You can see why it's so important for verbal operants that we know what evokes that behavior. That's going to be one of the first clear giveaways of what the answer could possibly be. This can't be tax. It's evoked by a verbal behavior. Is she taking dictation? Well, sure, right? Taking dictation, it doesn't have formal similarity. It has point-to-point correspondence, but, right, she's not missing a single word, and it's evoked by our verbal stimulus. This looks like textbook taking dictation. What about interverbals? Is the administrative assistant responding to Mr. Morgan without point-to-point correspondence and then with formal similarity? No. And she isn't engaged in a conversation and she's not answering questions, right? An interverbal is evoked by that verbal SD, and then the response does not have point-to-point correspondence. In this case, the administrative assistant is not missing a single word. She has point-to-point correspondence. It's not an interverbal. And is it a textual? Well, textual is evoked by written word. Mr. Morgan is delivering the quarterly recap. He's speaking, he's talking about the quarterly recap. Textuals are evoked by the written word. So, what the administrative assistant is engaged in is this taking dictation behavior. You can see that verbal operants can get very muddy, right? Because they're all evoked by something. Is it point to point? Is it formal similarity? Always start by what's evoking the behavior. If you have two that are evoked by the same thing, move on to, well, does this have point to point or does it not? Tacting evoked by a nonverbal stimulus is out. Intraverbals does not have point to point correspondence. That's out. Textuals evoked by written word. That's out. It has to be taking dictation. After a month of data collection following the implementation of a new treatment package, a behavior analyst sits down with the stakeholder and asks how things are going. The stakeholder says that they haven't noticed a change at all in behavior. But when the analyst looks at the graphed data, the data indicate a significant decrease in problem behavior. Which of the following should the analyst not do? Slow down, long question on top of it's a not question. And this is where our strategy of tackling the question and understanding the question first really comes into play. If you jump right to the answer choices, this question is going to be very difficult. It's going to take you forever. The not question. So 3 of these are what they could do. 1 is not. So what is occurring? Well, we've collected data and the behavior analyst wants to know how things are going. The stakeholder says they haven't noticed a change at all, but the graph data show a significant decrease in problem behavior. And this happens a lot. Sometimes where it's happening like this, where there's no change according to the stakeholder, but a lot of times it's the stakeholder says, I've noticed a huge change and the data don't reflect that. When that occurs, what can we do? What should we do? In this case, what should the analyst not do? A, the analyst should show and explain the graphs to the stakeholder. Absolutely. That's one of the reasons we use line graphs. They're very easy to interpret. They're easy to explain. You can see that change very clearly. Now, the stakeholder might not care and they still say, well, I haven't seen a change, but that is one step you can absolutely take. You should be sharing your graphs with stakeholders. B, the analyst should check for observer drift. Certainly, if the target behavior is screaming and the technician or whoever's taking the data has fallen victim to observer drift and they're observing something totally different, that could be an issue. So through supervision, we should check for observer drift. C, the analyst should change the intervention immediately. Well, no. Just because the stakeholder says they don't see a change doesn't mean we immediately go back to the drawing board because the data show a change. So we've got to figure out what's the discrepancy here. Where's the misunderstanding? And we can do that in several ways. We can show them the graph. We can check for treatment and observer drift, or we could conduct an indirect assessment with the stakeholder. We can sit down with the stakeholder and conduct a quick interview. Well, our target behavior is this. What are you seeing? Can you tell us more about that? What we shouldn't do is jump to conclusions and just assume the data are wrong and that the stakeholder is right. Are stakeholders involved in the process? Absolutely. Do their opinions have value? Absolutely. But the data show a change. We trust the data until we don't. And so we've got to figure out where is the discrepancy. That's our first job here. So what should we not do? Don't change the intervention immediately. Luke is traveling for work and attempts to buy some headphones at the airport since he forgot his at home. His card gets declined, so he swipes it again. He then tries to tap his card before trying to swipe it and tap it repeatedly. Eventually, he gives up and calls his bank. Luke swiping and tapping his card repeatedly may have been blank. So we're looking at Luke and specifically his behavior of swiping and tapping his card repeatedly. Why is that important? Well, let's look at the scenario. Luke, he's traveling, he's trying to buy headphones at the airport, and what happens? His card gets declined. In the past, Luke goes to buy an item, swipes his card, he buys the item. Now, his card gets declined. So swiping the card is no longer providing the reinforcement. That reinforcement is now being withheld. So Luke's behavior is now on extinction because previously he would swipe, the card would go through, he'd get his item. This time he swipes, no reinforcement, card gets declined. What does he do in response? Swipes it again. He then tries to tap his card, and then he tries to swipe it and tap it repeatedly. So you can picture in your head swiping and tapping repeatedly. Picture yourself at the store if your card, for some reason, doesn't go through. And so his behavior is increasing in frequency, is possibly increasing in magnitude. What do we call that when behavior, when put on extinction, increases in frequency or magnitude? A, extinction. So we're not looking at the consequence here. We're looking at the behavior of the swiping and tapping his card. It's a very important distinction. Luke, behavior is not extinction. Luke's behavior is likely an extinction burst. Why is it not spontaneous recovery? Well, spontaneous recovery comes after the burst, after extinction is finished. And it isn't negative punishment. We're not taking away anything. We're withholding reinforcement for previously reinforced behavior. It's a very important thing to remember about extinction and punishment. Extinction, we're withholding reinforcement for previously reinforced behavior. Punishment, we're adding or removing something, a punishing consequence. Very important distinction. Luke swiping and tapping his card most likely represents an extinction burst because his behavior is now on extinction. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps us. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you let us know when you pass so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.